So I believe we can call the meeting to order. And joining us online is City Clerk, Ms. Defoe, Deputy Clerk, Mr. Bantock, our planning Manager of Planning, Ms. Bridge, and our Director of Infrastructure, Mr. Delovic. So, and I believe also that will be joining us online shortly will be Mr. Ritz. So good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to call the Planning and Heritage Subcommittee to order. And item number 2, are there any disclosures of pecuniary interests? Seeing none. Moving over to item 3.1, delegations. And there is a motion with regards to a presentation by Robert Ritz. And it is that Mr. Ritz has requested to present to the subcommittee regarding the unsolicited proposal for development of the Erie Street parking lot by Zan Development Corporation. And there is a motion to hear Mr. Ritz. And moved by Councillor Vasilakos and second by Councillor Clifford. All in favor? I'm sorry, I didn't need a seconder for that. So moved by Councillor Vasilakos, and that's moved. And Ms. Defoe, is Mr. Ritz available?
So through the chair, yes, Mr. Ritz, can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes, you're loud and clear. And Mr. Ritz, just a reminder that you have a 10-minute window here to present, okay? And welcome.
Well, thank you. Well, the presentation, a lot of it you have received through the report that was submitted, Ed's response to the report, my reply to his response. I don't know how much of it you've read. Do you want me to give you a brief description of it, the main concept of it?
Absolutely. And then we'll
Okay.
open it up to questions.
So what it is the idea is between John and I, and it was something that was a spinoff when I was messing around with Market Square, was the idea of a parking garage under the Erie Street parking lot. And when I talked to Danielle about it, about the need for it, she said, yeah, there's a definite need for parking. And so we proceeded with how to physically pull it off. And so we spent last summer coming up with ways to do it. I've sent you drawings of what it would be like. 5 levels. We did a 5-story building on top on the west side of that parking lot, basically extending from the north entrance to the south entrance and deleting the middle entrance. During the prep of that and previous to it, spoke to Brian Blows a few times and a few other merchants adjacent to it about their concerns with it, because I know when Vic Hayter did it, there were some issues with it. What seems to win here, the key to the win, was the double loaded parking that still exists between our proposed building and the backs of the Wellington Street stores, which are illustrated on our plans. And the plans were part of the package, so they're later on at the back there. And you can see in the cross section, and it's on page 1, where we have City Hall on the left, the Wellington Street stores, and the proposed garage. And you can see the scale of it similar to the scale of the buildings on Wellington Street, but you can see how I have parking between the new building in color and the outline of the Wellington Street buildings. That happens to be the Blows building that we cut through in this scheme. So that was key. It was very key for Lee Halpern because he didn't realize that that would still exist, because that's important for his businesses, that they have the ability to have, you know, surface parking at that area. And he definitely loved the idea, well, all of them did, that there was parking available underground for which would allow them to develop the upper portions of their stores. And the other thing was that they'd rather, if there's ever a parking structure there, they preferred the below grade structure. That way their tenants would be looking at a building that's either, that would be a residential building with condos or apartments in it, or condominium apartments, I should say, versus looking at a parking garage. So it had positive features for them. Brian Blows, he's the one that has the principal, the middle driveway is actually a result of an easement that Blows have from the back of their building to Erie Street. And we were cutting that off, so it was important to get Brian on board. And his concern was to get that semis could get around the back of the building for deliveries. And we've set it up that we have the radiuses to allow semi-transport trucks to get in around the back of the building. And I also needed that for firefighting. So the fire department can fight fires from the rear of the Wellington Street stores, as well as the front, and even with our building. Our building would be sprinklered because it's residential and it's more than 3 stories high. The parking garage would also be sprinklered. So the way the garage worked is that the lot drops about 8 feet from the north entrance to the south entrance. And so we were basically driving in at grade at the south entrance underneath the building. But the floor level of the commercial level, the first floor, which is required by zoning not to be residential, is at grade on the north end. And then along the east side of the building, between the Wellington Street stores and the new building, the lot would be a single slope from one end to the other, a similar slope to what it currently is. So the cross section, so then what happens, the cross section we have in our key maps in the corners is a cross section from east-west. So what happens, we'll go to slide 3, which is basically the retail level. It's showing we have some ramps there to adjust for our slopes. We have a center entrance to our elevators to get to the apartments above or the parking garage below. Stairwells at each end. And then the next slide, which is in pink, that's number 4, that's showing layout of residential units of about 897 was our low, 1,100, 1,400 square feet. And then those are variations. That's a sample of what could possibly work there. And it was more for budgeting purposes. The next slide, 5, in sort of a mauve color, that's our entrance level for parking. And you can see the entrance and exiting coming off of the south end, and north is on the left-hand side. And then in the middle of the garage, we had a quick way to just keep looping around to get to the bottom a little bit quicker. You can see our elevators there for passengers going to go up to the main level to get out the back. And then the others are just floors as we go down into the garage deeper. The lowest level would likely be the residential level and the user's level of the building above, and the other levels would be public parking, with the top 2 more or less for shorter term parking. And then if anybody wanted to buy or rent a space, they could use the other levels. The way it was going to work financially was, key to this is the building above subsidizes the taxes from that building, subsidize the cost to pay off the cost to build the parking garage, along with the revenues from the parking garage. And I was trying to get the revenues, and this is in our report, I was trying to get the revenues so that current monthly rent for a parking space in downtown Stratford is $113 a month. So I had to make parking in the parking garage affordable at $113 a month. The advantage of the garage is it's 24-hour parking and it's designated parking. You could keep your space if you want to. The other idea was that you could actually buy a space from the city for $50,000. The idea was, after it was built, developer would take it, build it, sell the parking lot back to the city, less the level that they would need, or, well, they would buy, we would sell the parking garage back to the city, and then the developer would actually buy one deck from the city for $5 million for the parking they needed on the levels above. The rest of the parking you could rent at $113 a month, and your cash flow would work to amortize a debt over 30 years. And after 30 years, the garage is paid for. And then after that, you're using that money for refurbishing costs. My budget's included repairs and maintenance as well. I was interested that Ed's department did not comment on the math, which was sort of a good thing, I guess, because we spent a fair bit of time running the math, as you can see, and it gets a little heavy, as I said in my opening letter. So, so anyways, that's the way it's working. going back to Ed's comments with the most recent letter, I replied to that. And I gotta find my response. So what I did, I replied directly to Ed's comments. Okay, so what we were doing is that no cost for the land was sort of the trick. When I was talking to the merchants, we had to watch that too. We had to watch that we were paying our fair share for the parking space. So the question is, well, how is it fair? You're paying $5 million for your parking lot, and the land was free. But our argument is basically you could, for $5 million, you can buy land and build a parking lot with no problem. You'd have money left. And the idea is that this was to help the core. But the other side of that was if anybody else in town needed to buy parking for a development that they have, instead of tearing down buildings to build a parking lot or a garage, they could buy spaces from the city at $50,000 each, which is the cost to build them, and build a bigger building on their own site. So basically, again, they're getting the land for free for their parking, which sort of helps them with their land. The other idea is, the developer could buy the parking lot from the city as it is, build the development, and then sell the parking lot portion back to the city. So there is a show that the city received money for the lot, and then the city's buying back a developed parking garage. And then in that, the cost of the land is varied. But what I'm saying is, the math just doesn't work if you're going to throw in the cost of land, because the city is using the land below it still for parking. You haven't lost any parking, you're generating revenue from the parking below deck. And through taxes, you're generating revenue from above deck. So that's sort of the whole land purchase comment. The revising parking rates, city purchased parking spaces. The parking space not so bad. It was basically those spaces help finance the cost of the garage. So the city ends up, doesn't cost the city anything. The cash flow from the garage and the taxes pays to amortize their costs for the garage. The fourth point or comment was the revised parking spaces. Say we revised parking spaces. We suggested that to encourage users, to encourage people to use the garage. The idea is if it costs $1 below grade to park and it's only $1.25 to park above grade, well, I'll go above grade, it's less cost for parking. And so what we said was, and a lot of the merchants downtown would like it that parking was virtually free. And I made a suggestion years ago about what about 15 minutes free and then a quarter for the next 15 minutes. And after that, it starts going up. So it discourages people from parking for a long term in front of a store, such as theater goers. And if you can park underground for $4 for 4 hours or above ground for maybe $10 for 4 hours at $2.50 an hour, it would encourage people to park underground. Those that work downtown, it's economical and it is relatively convenient. It's actually, we had another map that I didn't present that showed the travel distance of this lot compared to the rail shop site. So that sort of talks about why we thought rate adjustments should take place. Because it'd be great to go downtown, get a steak from Rick and walk out in 15 minutes and not drop any money in the meter. Next item, last item.
Rob?
I'm in watching time.
Yeah, you are at 12 minutes, so
okay,
you could wrap up.
Okay, well, the last point was we don't have to freeze rezoning. That was just to encourage. So basically I'm just reading what I sent you, and that's it. Looking for questions.
Thank you. So thank you for the presentation. I'm at this time, are there any questions from council? I know we have the project in front of us, but are there any questions from council? Councillor Clifford.
Well, I don't have a question exactly. I mean, there's all kinds of things like the cost of the parking garage and all that. But I'm a great believer on having a parking garage instead of having parking like on flat ground and having like all this land town has already got the infrastructure as far as the sewage and the storm and electricity and everything. So, I think it's an interesting proposal. I'm not sure I agree with all the cost as far as to us, but overall, I think it's something, I have some interest in this, quite frankly. And I think and I think the other thing, once the hub is built, which is going to be, we won't have that parking down at the Cooper site we have right now. And if we do, it won't be free either, because there's going to be costs there. So I think to have a proper parking garage downtown, I guess the question I have for Mr. Ritz is there a problem when you go down in the ground, as far as you're talking about, as far as water and, pumps and all that kind of stuff? It's my
Okay.
question, I guess. Is there a problem going in the ground as far as it's proposed here?
Okay, to answer that question, we did do that research. I wanted to address with services. Well, the way we've positioned the building is that the services for the Wellington Street stores would remain intact. We were juggling it back and forth because one idea is to push it under the street a bit more. The idea is that there would still be a service lane behind the buildings. It'll only be 10 feet wide during the construction period. That's where we would run our sanitary and storm that runs down the back, and electricity. To go with the depth, depth was a non-issue. We were speaking to caisson companies that would build the perimeter wall, and parking garage companies. To let you know how deep we are, is that the bottom of the garage is above the low side of the dam, or the low water side. We're below the high water side, but not in the winter months. So it works. And groundwater is typically managed in a parking garage, and most garages of depth are designed to accommodate that.
Thank you. Any other questions from council? Seeing none. Thank you very much, Mr. Ritz, for your presentation. I appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Moving on to item 4, report of the Director of Infrastructure and Development Services. 4.1, with regards to the unsolicited proposal for the development of the Erie Street parking lot. And there is a staff recommendation that the proposal from R. Ritz Architect on behalf of Zan Development Corporation be received and filed. A mover for that, Councillor Vasilakos. Thank you. All in favor? And that's carried.
I have a question.
Certainly.
If it's filed, it comes to like all of council, correct? Like what I want to know if staff have any interest in it at all. Like, I haven't heard from our director. Like, I think it's a proposal that, would have to change some things, but I would like to know if our staff have any interest in this at all before we have a vote on it.
I see Mr. Dolovic is on the screen. Do you want to speak to that, Mr. Dolovic?
Yes, through the chair. That's what we're looking for from council. In the past, when the city did consider this, they went out for RFPs. They looked to see what was out there in the market, if there were other developers interested. If this is something council wants to do as a whole, because this will go on to council for them to consider, maybe receive and file. They may want us to look into it more. There would be a fair bit of work. If that's something we want to see done, it would be staff's recommendation that we would proceed, that we would do an RFP like we've done in the past. I think before you do that, you need to make sure what those property owners that do have easements across the Erie Street plot, what they're prepared to accept, what is good for them, get that tied up legally, so that when you do go through, if we do proceed with the RFP process, we could tell a developer with confidence that, these are the lands that can be developed. Then the city would then set what the city was looking for. Would the city be offering the land for free, or offering it at a nominal cost? But then we should open that up to anybody out there who may be interested in doing it. Would we allow the parking garage portions of it to go into the road allowance? Those are all type of things that the municipality needs to consider. And then, we would strongly recommend that if that's the direction that council wants to go in, that we go through the RFP process. But there would be quite a bit of work to do up front in doing that type of RFP process to ensure that the municipality gets what it wants out of a proposal. You know, what are the goals? What are the objectives of doing something like this?
Were you telling me I could speak?
Great.
Yeah, because I was hoping, I know I made the motion, but I was hoping I could speak to it a little bit. One of my concerns in not filing it is closing a lot of other options. Some of the conditions that that came with this proposal are ones that I would never agree to. Certainly that the idea of making less expensive parking underground and then asking people who may not be comfortable using underground parking that they're paying a premium to not. I'm thinking, you know, there are a number of reasons why we wouldn't. The idea of freezing zoning in the rest of the cities to push this project makes no sense. But the other part of it is, if we are going to do the hub, we have a section where the burned out section is that's going to be removed that really can't be used for a lot of things, but could be used for tiered parking. And that could cost us an awful lot less than this. So without actually looking at how we're going to develop the railway yards and what potential there is for parking there, I think it's a little premature to move ahead with something at this site. And I absolutely agree that if this were something that we would consider, it would be something we go to RFP and see what our best the best option would be and how we could best leverage. So that's all.
Thank you, Councillor Vasilakos. Any other comments? Councillor Bunting.
Through the chair, question for Mr. Delovic. Is there any comparisons? Like, obviously the difference if you're going above ground with tiered parking as opposed to digging a great big hole and making it below ground. Is there a percentage? It's twice as expensive, or do you know?
The chair, I wish I'd got some of those numbers. I do know that underground parking is more expensive than above ground parking, and it could be. We'd have to look at it, but it is considerably more going underground than it is going above ground.
And I take it that because of the size of the development and the depth we're going here in an uptown area, and with all the other technical things involved, are there many companies around this southwestern Ontario that would take something like this on, would have the capability of actually caissoning a rectangular area and then digging down what I figure is about 45 to 50 feet?
The chair, not aware of who's available. I mean, we'd be probably looking if there's contractors in the KW or London area where you would see something like this. I mean, this is technically feasible. It's just a matter of how much it would cost. Yeah. You know, one of the things that will determine cost is boreholes to see what the ground conditions are like. Going back to Councillor Clifford's ask about groundwater, don't know. You'd have to again do boreholes and do testing to see how much groundwater there is. If there's a lot, you know, then you need more pumps in an underground parking garage to keep pumping to pump out that water. There could be less, and that all depends on what the conditions are, and you really don't know until you start putting down a few boreholes in the area at that depth to see what would happen. And typically you would leave them for a few months to see where the water levels were at, what kind of water is at depth, and how fast it could percolate in. So there's would be a lot of work that would be required to determine what type of construction cost would be involved, but it's not impossible. You know, they're doing it in downtown Toronto. I'm sure they've done it in London and KW where they've gone to these type of depths. It's nothing unusual, the depths that they're talking about.
Thank you. So I'm going to go back to the clerk for a moment, if I may. I believe it was moved in second, and I believe we voted on it, if I'm correct.
Through the chair, yes, that is correct.
Yes. And so then through the clerk once again, if we wish for this still to come forward, even though this particular piece has been filed, or this proposal, would it come forward through these minutes to council Planning and Heritage Committee open session?
So through the chair, yes, what we could do is list this committee recommendation on a subsequent Planning and Heritage Committee agenda there would be another opportunity for review, discussion, potential recommendations. That recommendation would then proceed to a future regular council meeting, and then that would be the final decision.
Thank you. And does that suffice for you, Councillor Clifford?
Yes, that's great. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Anything else on this item? Thank you. Seeing none, we'll move down to project update. And Ms. Bridge, are you available to give us a verbal update?
I am, yes, thank you. So through you, Chair Ritzma, good afternoon, members of Planning and Heritage Subcommittee. So there's a number of ongoing planning applications that are in process, so I'll run through those quickly. So there's two plans of subdivision that are currently under review. The first one of those is on Daly Avenue, and this is a major modification to an existing draft plan of subdivision. And staff are currently working with the developer on this one to sort out some of the technical comments on the engineering studies that had been submitted. In addition to that, we have a new residential plan of subdivision in the northwest area of Stratford. This one was at the public meeting in February, and there are about 526 residential units proposed in that subdivision. As well, we've recently issued final approval to phase 1 of Countryside phase 3 subdivision, and 58 single detached lots were approved through that process. There's also some ongoing plan of condominium work. So as you'll recall, at the last Planning and Heritage meeting, there was a draft plan of condominium on that agenda for 3194 Vivian Line 37, where there are 28 apartment condominium units proposed and 34 parking units. There's also recently been final approval given to a plan of condominium on 456 Lorne Avenue West. Through that approval, 168 condo units were created, but that includes 52 residential units, 38 storage locker units, and 78 parking units. There's also a number of recent zone change applications that are in process. I'll draw your attention to 3 in particular, which are Z0221, Z0321, and Z0421. And those 3 zoning applications will be coming for a public meeting before council in mid-April. There's also a number of both residential and non-residential site plans under review. I'll draw your attention to 2 recent residential site plans. The first of those being at 379 Romeo Street, where there are 3 buildings and a total of 30 residential units proposed through that site plan. The second is on Bradshaw Drive. They're municipally addressed as 294, 295, and 338 Bradshaw Drive. So this would be north of McCarthy Road. And there are 50 street fronting townhouses proposed through that site plan. Moving on to Ontario Municipal Board hearings, and that heading should be changed to Local Planning Appeal Tribunal hearings. So I'll get that updated for the next project update report. So there was an appeal received for 173 Huron Street, which was a zoning bylaw amendment. And we've received notice from the LPAT of the first case management conference for that zoning bylaw amendment appeal in mid-April. So staff will be attending that case management conference. So just getting to overall numbers. So to date in 2021, we've received a number of committee of adjustment applications, 4 consent applications, and 13 minor variances. You'll also see in the following table the number of planning applications to date by application type. So we've had 1 official plan amendment, 4 zone change applications, a subdivision application, a condo application, 5 new site plan applications, and 13 formal consultation submissions so far this year. When it comes to building, they've been busy over in the building department. There's been a total of 67 building permits issued to date in 2021. And of that, 44 were for single detached dwellings, 4 triplex or quad dwellings, and 4 townhouse dwellings. I'm happy to take any questions on the project update at this time.
Thank you very much, Ms. Bridge. Questions? Councillor Clifford.
It isn't exactly a planning issue, but it's around planning. Is there any update on the McCarthy Road? We've got a subdivision, and any update on the McCarthy going through to a loan?
Ms. Bridge or Mr. Dolovic. There you are. Thank you.
Yeah, through you, Chair. It is something I'm working on with the CAO and some discussions that have gone on with the current owner. I can't give you any other more than that. We've had some discussions, and there hasn't been anything recently that's moved forward on that file.
Any other questions for manager of planning or the director? If I may, and perhaps this is to Mr. Dolovic, I've received several calls from seniors that are in larger homes, and many of which are single individuals still in their family home, and they're empty nesters and looking to downsize and looking to buy, not ready to move into a retirement home, but looking to buy a smaller single home. I'm just wondering if there's anything in the works with regards to partnership and works on creating that type of housing. I know in other communities, I looked at Godridge, they're doing some work in that, and other nearby communities. If you could maybe give us a little bit of an update on that, if you could.
Yeah, through the chair. It's been several months now, but there's been one developer in particular that caters to these, we'll call it lifestyle homes that are catering to those 55 plus that, just as you said, are looking to downsize. They've been looking for some land here in Stratford. They feel that there's a market here for it. I think it's just even as of fall last year, they were speaking to engineering at the time and planning, getting some, the zoning that was in place, what the servicing was like. So I think that their challenge is finding something that is at the right price that they can buy and then develop something like this. So definitely we've heard from developers who are interested in serving that market. I know that through Invest Stratford, we're looking at something on attainable, affordable housing, but again, providing that type of different housing mix. I think that's why some of the apartment buildings on Durrell Street were quite successful. There were a lot of people who were looking to downsize and going into smaller living quarters, as they no longer wanted to have the large homes to live in. So it's just a matter of there is interest. It's just a matter of getting those developers being able to find land and developing it for that segment.
So two follow-up questions, if I may. First, is there city and land available for such a partnership? And maybe it's too early for that discussion. And also, will a presentation be coming at all to council, or are we a little bit too early for that yet?
My understanding, there will be a presentation. It's just going through staff. I mean, the city does own a fair bit of land, but at the same time, that council's also talked about using that land for affordable housing. So that's where some of this work that's tying in, that's being done, could potentially come forward. We have that large piece over at McCarthy. I think it's about 15 acres there. We also have some lands on Vivian by the condo that you just dealt with, application that was just dealt with council on Monday night. We own some land in that area as well. So yes, there are some city properties, but we've based on council's past comments, we've held on to that for looking at affordable, attainable housing and seeing how we can leverage those lands in the future.
Thank you. Councillor Clifford and Councillor Vasilakos.
Yeah, I was going to ask them, you were talking about, Chair, are you talking townhouses or condos? Like when you're older, do you still want, and we also got intensification. So is that what you're talking about, or single small homes, or a combination of the three?
Go ahead, Mr.
Through the chair, I think we're looking at all of it, all of the above, because I think everyone could be smaller homes with smaller properties, one level, depending, if they have two-story homes with large properties, and some people maybe townhomes. It depends on what you're ready to do. Some people may be ready for the condo type facility where they have nothing to maintain. They're quite happy to pay their yearly condo fee and someone else is taking care of everything for them. So I think we're looking at a variety of options as to what could work.
Thank you. Councillor Vasilakos?
I was just going to make a similar point that in my mind, attainable housing and smaller senior housing, like those can be mixed communities where square footage of houses and lots, like it would be traditionally back to like what we talked about with starter homes, but then starter homes can become retirement homes as well, like retirement stage homes. and where I think certainly on city land, I think if we could avoid making exclusive buildings that are, strictly for the 55 plus, because we have just as many young families that are currently not able to get into the housing market in that sort of attainable range as we do seniors looking to downsize. So I like the idea of coming up with higher density, smaller square footage homes. I would just hate for us to start to slot only specific demographics into that.
Thank you, Councillor Vasilakos. Anything further? And thank you for those updates, Mr. Delovic. So you do have some minutes in item number 6 with regards to the Heritage Stratford Advisory Committee. Those minutes are there, and our next subcommittee meeting is scheduled for Thursday, April the 29th at 3:30. Is there anything else before I ask for adjournment? Seeing none, motion to adjourn. Councillor Bunting, all in favor? Thank you, everybody. Have a great afternoon. Bye-bye now.